Oh, my goodness.
A push for party unity. Donald Trump holding an unannounced meeting with RNC Chair Priebus in Washington yesterday, just days after the GOP frontrunner backed out of a pledge to support the eventual nominee and came under fire for comments he made about women who have abortions. Trump telling the O'Reilly Factor he's all about bringing the party together.
It was a very good meeting. We met with Priebus and the staff, and they're very good people, actually a terrific meeting, I think. And it's really a unity meeting. You know, we're leading by a lot. We have far and away the most delegates, millions and millions of votes more than anybody else, than Ted has or than, Kasich has. It's been about unity. I get along with people. I get along with them very well. So we had a very good meeting with the RNC.
In the meantime, RNC Chair Priebus saying he's confident the candidates will stick to their pledge to support the nominee.
I'm not really worried about, in regard to supporting the eventual nominee or the party. They've all agreed to that by virtue of, in one case, signing our data agreement. They're not going to get the data and the tools of the RNC and run to be our nominee and tell me that they're not going to support the party. It doesn't work that way.
Now, speaking of data, we have some new data from Fox Business, polls that show that Donald Trump could be fading in a state like Wisconsin, where voters head to the polls on Tuesday. Trump is now trailing Ted Cruz among likely Republican primary voters by 10 points. Trump also trailing the Texas senator by 19 points among women. And that poll taken almost entirely before the comments he made about abortion. Okay, Mr. Idell, you're usually arguing in a courtroom, but you're going to fight us right here on set.
Okay.
Okay, so Trump seems to be struggling after a series of missteps where he stuck his foot in his mouth. We're going to get to the foreign policy comments, but first, specifically on women, looking at a state like Wisconsin, where I think naturally a couple weeks ago or even months ago, you thought that Trump would have done better or would be doing better at this point, but down 10 points to Ted Cruz. Does it speak to a candidate in trouble?
So I think there's two things going on, and quite frankly, you would actually know more about this than I do because of your background, but in every campaign, candidates stumble. In every campaign, they always have a down period. It's true in sports. You know, it's very rare that the first place team stays in first place from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. If I'm Donald Trump's team, I'm thinking if he's going to stumble, if he's going to have a hard time, let it be now. Let it be on April 1st. Let it be when we still have time to recover. He has the cushion of the delegate count. He may lose Wisconsin. It may be a wake-up call. And you know what? In life, everybody could use a wake-up call every once in a while. Everyone could have their ego smacked around a little bit. And usually, and I'm not saying this would be the case with Donald Trump, but usually that makes you a better person. When you get knocked down and you have to pull yourself up off the canvas, it usually makes you a better boxer going forward. And in the best case scenario, that's what will happen with Donald Trump, in the best case scenario for him.
Best case scenario, he does, Sandra, retool, pull himself back up, but the numbers. So even as Arthur mentioned, he has the numbers with the delegates in the lead, and he could afford to do not so good in Wisconsin, the way that they divvy up their delegates going into other states like Pennsylvania and New York. But specifically the numbers with females, the numbers of men that he would have to win to make up the number of females nationally, it's looking like that could be a really tough climb.
Well, yeah, and a lot of his critics and his supporters, for that matter, are wondering where the strategy is to try to win over that female vote. We haven't seen him really change or target women in any new or specific way. That being said, I'll always be the first to say that the economy and jobs is the #1 issue for women. That being said, I just still wonder what was said in that meeting, because you look at 2 days prior to that meeting with the RNC and with Priebus, and Donald Trump's exact words were, "I have been treated very unfairly," and he was referencing the RNC and the party establishment in general. Then he walks out of there, he says, "Well, that was so productive, and that was a terrific meeting. This was a unity meeting. We're all together on this." I mean, what happened in there that so drastically changed his outlook on his party?
Yeah, and when he walked out, Reince Priebus came back and said, look, he's got a math problem, and the math problem isn't with us. But when Donald Trump says that he hasn't been treated fairly, Melissa, does he have a point?
Well, he hasn't said it in the past day or so. I mean, like Sandra said, he really changed his tune, and maybe this was the kick in the pants that he needed. He is a marketing genius. We need to see some of that genius come alive right now if he wants to keep his place. But look what he did with AIPAC, because this was an example of where he corrected course effectively. He had said early on that he would be a neutral party, sitting down at the table. He walked into that hall. These are, you know, a very astute and critical group looked at him. He delivered a speech that pleased. He had all the right notes. He said there is no moral equivalency. You know, the president applies pressure to our friends and reward to our enemies. He had a speech that was well written. He went from the prompter. He knew he needed to perform, and he did it. This is another moment like that. He's going to need to correct course and get out there with some real help. From the look of that meeting, you're right, when he came out, it seems like he's changing course, but he's going to have to follow through.
Is it enough time to change course in a state like Wisconsin, where, again, you would think he would do well with that demographic? I mean, that's a state, as you know, Jillian, Scott Walker, the governor. I mean, he did well. He was reelected, elected and reelected by taking on the union, something that a Republican governor had never done in a very purple state. This is a state that should appeal to Donald Trump. So why the 10-point drop?
Well, and also, you know, everybody likes to talk about his appeal among men without college educations. Here's a prime state for him. He's really primed to do well there, so it's very shocking. And I think that the course correction here with the RNC is a little bit of what you ladies were talking about a moment ago, which is the diluted numbers with women, because we all know the Republican Party does very well amongst women of all ages. And I think this is a little bit of a come to mama moment here, where he's kind of being corralled and they're, you know, correcting course, and it's kind of mutually beneficial at this point.
Just to answer Andrew's question about what could have happened in that meeting that changed the dialogue about how Donald feels about the RNC, often when I have a case with a prosecutor and, you know, we're battling in the newspapers against each other, or even on the telephone, that dynamic changes dramatically when I go into their office and I sit down with them and we're face to face. And I did it yesterday, and I bring my client in with me, who's the real subject, and everyone gets humanized. Like, the temperature just drops. And often I leave those meetings going in as like these antagonistic battleships, and everyone's calmed down. So possibly, and Trump has that kind of charm that he could pull something like that off.
Not unlike your visits to Outnumbered either.